incredibly cognizant that I'm the only thing standing between you and free beer, so please bear with me. Maybe we'll be able to learn something together. So the reason that I picked this first slide, when I was a child, I used to think that the yin and yang symbol was the battle between good and evil. I read a lot of fantasy as a kid, I still do. But growing up, I learned that it is actually the duality between two opposing forces that actually complement one another. Now, don't worry, that's as deep as I get. So to me, it made sense that push and pull, they seem to be totally different things, but when you use them together, they can complement your application, they can make it more powerful. So like I said, that is as deep as I'm going to get. This is more like me. Oh, that was supposed to stretch. Anyway, that is a picture that my daughter took, and I absolutely love it. And for me, those ants are now called push and pull. So if you need to get a hold of me, the best way to do it is via Twitter. I'm trying to get email completely out of my life. Other than that, it's all Slack. So use that Twitter handle to get a hold of me if you have any questions, and that is my blog where I'll be posting up these slides probably later today. All right, so let's talk about push. Hey, wow, that was bad. Let's talk about push. All right, so what is a push? Now, I'm pretty sure you guys already know what this is. It's just the way that allows you to send messages to people that are running your application. So if you take a look at all of the platforms, they have a slightly different way of displaying this, but as time has gone on, the kind of notification shade seems to have become the industry standard to do things. And I'll let Apple and Google fight about who actually invented that. I don't really care. So the prevalence of push. Now, sadly, I don't have the numbers for iOS and for Windows Phone, but with the Play Store on Google, you can get a pretty good indication about how many apps are actually using push. So nearly 15% of the apps on the entire Play Store have the push libraries in it. So you can see that is a pretty good amount. It's not a huge amount, but when you take a look at what is actually installed on your device, that number jumps to 42%. So correlation doesn't necessarily indicate causation, but it seems like the apps that people use, the sticky apps, the ones that you want to use, provide some sort of push notification. So what's important here is we have to take a look at what the opt-in rates. So across the board, this is a recent study by Urban Airship, they found that the opt-in rates were 42% last year. So that's coming down from 45% the year before. It's not a huge jump. We don't really want to say that it's trending down, but what we're seeing is that opt-in rates tend to be higher in Android than they are in iOS. So the main reason for that is Android doesn't pop up that dialog that says, oh, are you going to allow push notifications? If you want to add push to your app, you just go ahead and you include the library. You don't even have to tell the user that you're doing it. That would be a mistake, but you can do that. So how do we increase these opt-in rates so that more of your users will actually be benefiting from the important information that you push? Well, as I alluded to in the previous slide, don't rely on the operating system to prompt your users for you. So you guys mostly are developers, you're highly skilled technical people. When you see a dialogue like that, you go, oh, okay, yeah, push notifications, I understand what's going on. But if you're my dad, who's a 73-year-old judge, when he sees something like that, he thinks people are trying to steal his credit card information. So he's a judge, he's really smart, but this stuff still scares him. So what you want to be able to do is provide your own UI that'll show up before this dialog box from the operating system that explains to your users why they want to enable push in your application. And so what we found is that can boost the opt-in rates to up to 60%. So that is a key thing to remember if you're going to be adding push into your application. So push can unfortunately backfire. So can you guess what the top reason is why people uninstall applications? Okay, it's not rocket science, I'm doing a presentation on it, right? It's annoying notifications. Look, 71% of people responded that they would uninstall an application if it sent too many push notifications. So yeah, it's totally annoying push notifications. I'm sure, oh God, what is that app that my daughter used to play, the Subway Runner? It seemed like every 30 seconds I was getting like, oh, hey, there's a new person, or hey, there's a new map, or just, yeah, I had to get rid of that. It was driving me nuts. So how don't we annoy people? Well, first and foremost, don't send too many push notifications. That's not any kind of genius statement there. But you also have to take a look at what your application is. So for something like Slack or Twitter, you probably get a little bit more leeway because you're connecting people socially. You can send a few more push notifications. But if you're like Etsy or eBay, you don't want to be inundating your users with all of these push notifications because they'll just go ahead and uninstall that app on you. So on top of that, you want to make sure that the push is useful. So one push doesn't always make sense for all of your users. You want to start segmenting these pushes. So what we're seeing is that broadcast pushes, which are ones sent to everyone that has installed your application, they're only acted on about 3% of the time, which is not a huge. But if you start targeting your pushes, if you use the information you know about the user, their geolocation, other things like that, you can bump that up to 7%. Still not a huge number, but it's over twice what it would be if you just send a shotgun message out to everyone. So like I said, you can use geofencing in order to push a better targeted message. So also make it configurable. So you don't want to just have that dialog come up and say, yeah, we're going to send you push notifications and not give the user any way to be able to turn it off or to indicate what kind of pushes they have. Now, this would be like the most Canadian content I have in this presentation, but this is the CBC News. This is an example of an application that I uninstalled because it was annoying the hell out of me with too many push notifications. It was sending me, every time there was a new story on CBC News' homepage, it would send me a push notification. I didn't care about 87% of them, and that's a statistic I just made up on the spot. But still, it only gave you the ability to either receive or not receive push notifications. It didn't give you any way to segment it into things that you actually cared about, which for me would probably be hockey scores. But anyway, so that's good if you at least in your application provide a way to turn pushes on and off. A better way of doing it is something like Slack or NHL Game Center, where I can really get in there and have a wide breadth of options. So I can say, yeah, I want to know about all of these things. Also, when I talked about earlier for having your own UI, so if you're on an Android application, you may want to give a person a dialogue to tell them like how to turn on and off push notifications and give them the option to go to this settings page that you're going to provide so that they get to know this immediately. So down the road where they're like, okay, I'm getting too many pushes, they don't immediately go and remove the application. Instead, they go to settings and just restrict how many pushes can be sent. You'll find that people will keep your app around a lot longer that way. Also, oh my God, quiet hours. I don't know why more apps don't provide quiet hours. I love Slack. It's great, but I work in a distributed team, so I have people in London, San Francisco, I'm in Ottawa, there's people in Vancouver, and sometimes at 3 in the morning when the guys in London get up and start chatting away on Slack, because I don't know, I'm sure most of you, like myself, use my phone as an alarm clock. So it's sitting there all the time and it's vibrating. And that just drives me nuts. So it'd be very smart even for you to add quiet hours into your application so that push notifications just don't happen between the hours of say like 11 and 7, or make it user configurable, because you can't really trust the person on the app server to actually respect your users' times. You have to build that in yourself. Now, also, don't make the assumption that, oh, there's operating system features that allow you to handle that. Not everybody's going to set that. Not everybody's going to remember to do that. But of course, there is Do Not Disturb on iOS, and there's Android's priority mode, which I don't know. I haven't been able to get it to stay sticky. You can set it indefinitely, but I really want it to come on at like, say, midnight and come back off at 7 a.m. But I haven't figured out a way to do that yet. So if you know how to do that, just come talk to me afterwards. So let's actually get into some code here, because that was like a whole bunch of like marketing stuff, which is not me. All right, so we'll talk about the registration phase of push notifications. So this is my very bad diagram. So you have your app, then you have the push service. That's usually Google or Apple or Windows Phone. That's the third-party push service. And then you have the application server. Sometimes you have control over that app server, sometimes you don't. But basically, your app is going to call register into the push service. It will get back a registration ID, and then you have to send that to your app server. So that allows the operating system to be able to say, okay, this is your unique ID, and then you send it on to your application server so that you actually know who you can be sending pushes to. So in the current push plugin, this is how register works. So here we go. We're going to call register. We give it a success handler, an error handler, give her sender ID. So in this case, that's if you've ever done push for Android, that's going to be your GCM project ID. And then you give it a method to handle the notifications that are coming back. All right, that's not too bad. So we're going to enhance our application now. We're going to add iOS. Okay, well, now I have to check whether the platform is Android or iOS. And then on iOS, I have to send a totally different set of options into the registration function. Got to tell it about badges, sounds, alerts. Oh, now I have to give it a totally different handler for an Apple push notification coming back in because they don't come in the same format. All right, it's getting kind of ugly. And then we add Windows to this, and all of a sudden we have more data that we have to send to it, including the channel name, because Windows uses a URL to indicate what application you're talking to. And as we see, again, on notification windows, now we have a third method that we have to write in order to handle incoming notifications. So what do we notice about this? I think we just talked about it, but it bears repeating. The configuration is dependent upon the device platform. So for each platform, you have to configure your push notifications slightly differently. There's different methods to receive notifications, and there's different methods for receiving the registration ID. So receiving registration ID looks a bit like this. On Android, the success handler doesn't get called on register. It's, for some weird reason, on notification, your notification handler gets called, and you have to take a look at what event type it is. If it's registered, then you have your registration ID. It's like, okay. But then on iOS, you pass in a token handler, which is actually the success function of register. So it's a totally different thing, and it just comes along as the result. All right, it's not terribly hard code, but again, it's getting kind of ugly. And then finally, on Windows, you pass in a different method, which is the channel handler, and you can see that it's the result.uri. So we have 3 functions. We have 3 different ways in which the data is passed back to these functions. So that drives me a bit nuts. So different registration handler for each of these things. Okay, so that reminds me a lot of a code smell. So Martin Fowler is one of my favorite authors. I actually can read refactoring and just really enjoy it. It's a great technical book. If anybody hasn't read it already, you should really take a look at it. So taking a look at this way the push plugin is set up, and to me it reminds me of a code smell. So we set about unifying this interface. We have spent quite a bit of time updating the push plugin, and now the interface is the same across all of the platforms. So what we have here now is you create your new push notification, you do an initialize function. So you can pass in your Android data, your iOS data, your Windows Phone data, and when you get the registration ID back, there is an event the registered event that you just listened to, and now it comes back, and each and every time it's data.registration ID, so there's no difference. So it doesn't matter anymore. You don't have to be doing crazy things like checking for which device you're on. You just pass that configuration data into init. You don't have to worry about doing multiple functions in order to receive the registration ID, and the data that is coming back is the same each and every time. So we're trying to make this simpler for everyone. So the question is, where did the notification handler go? That's a good question. So let's talk about that a bit. So on notifications, basically, someone at your app server is going to send a push. It will go off to the third-party service like APNS or GCM, and eventually that'll end up on your app. And oh yeah, it bears repeating that not necessarily will it actually end up at your app because push notifications aren't guaranteed. I worked for a startup where we had to build a guaranteed push notification system. I don't recommend anybody trying to do that. It wasn't fun. So what we had before is the on-notification GCM. So okay, I said, for some reason, Android has both their notification and the registration together. So we have to add a new case into our switch statement in order to get the message. And then if I want to display that, I can call our alert function with the message in the title. So that's fine. But on iOS, it's slightly different because you can see the data that's coming back is alert in title instead of message in title, so things are a little bit different. And finally, on Windows, again, it's just the case that is different, but still, each one of these things coming back is just a little bit different. So it's not as bad as registration, but like I said, you need a switch statement. Each notification is different. And it actually gets a lot worse because that's a very small, contrived example. But when you start thinking about things like the sounds and badges to count how many notifications you have, or any other additional data that comes back, then it gets really out of control pretty damn fast. So again, what we've done is we've unified this interface. Now you get an event, our notification event. It comes in with the data, and each and every time it's called data.message or data.title. So it's the same code. You don't have to worry about it anymore. So the notification object is now completely consistent. You can count on 4 things being there: the title, the message, the sound, and the count. So those things will always be there. Of course, if you don't send a count or if you don't send the sound, they'll just be empty strings, but you can count on those 4 items always being there. Anything additional gets dumped into the JSON object, so if there's any additional data that you're sending along from like Android or APNS, that will get put into there. So that allows you to write one notification handler and just having it work across all the different platforms that your application is running on. So that is available today at this URL, and please go ahead, create an application with it. Let us know what the issues are, fork it, do pull requests. We'd be very happy to have that. So what we're taking a look at right now is for our next steps, continued maintenance, because honestly that push plugin was kind of old and crufty, and from now on it's probably going to be, well, not probably, it's my responsibility. So I have to keep it working. So if it doesn't, you know who to blame and you know who to get after on Twitter. As well, we're going to engage other third-party push notification vendors. I would like to, I can't see up here. You guys, I think you guys are out there, but like talk to Ben and Max. They're going to be introducing their own push notification service with Ionic. We want to make sure we work with them out of the box. We want to make sure that things like Urban Airship and PushWhoosh all work with this just to make your lives a lot easier. As well, there is a push notification draft. I think as of Chrome 42, they've actually included it into Chrome. It's a little bit different than, well, it's a lot bit different than the API that we have here, but we want to be able to provide feedback on that, and we're going to be working with Microsoft on that as well. So, and then just iterate. So you guys let us know what features you need in this push notification plugin, and we'll just iterate over it. So that's pretty much the first phase of what we've got here. Now, we also have to talk about pull. So pull, it's not as well defined as I think a push notification. Everybody just immediately knows that those annoying things that you get from like Farmville and stuff like that. But pull is anytime an application requests new data. And that is just everywhere. It's like Facebook, of course, your timeline. I think that's what it's called. I never use Facebook anymore. If you're like Twitter, you're getting constant updates. It's constantly pulling new data. And the same thing with Instagram. You're seeing those new images come in. So that's basically what a pull is. So if you want to take a look at the anatomy of a pull, from a very basic level, you may try to do something like this, where you have your application talking to your app server. So you make an XHR request, the response comes back, and you're going to parse some JSON, and then say that JSON has 10 items in it. Each one of those items has an image that you need to download. Then you're going to make a download request, get your response, and then do that ad nauseum until you've got all of your responses back. So that's pretty well understood. It's not too difficult to do. If we were taking a look for the code for this, so create our new HTML, XML HTTP request. We set it open to, we want to open books.json. So in my contrived example, I have a list of books that I want to download the metadata for. So once I get that data back, I'm going to parse it, and then I'm going to loop through there, getting each and every one of those cover images and download that to my application. So that works. It's not bad, but I just made 11 network requests. I had to go off and get the JSON, and then I had to go and get all of those cover images separately. So that's 11 network requests, 336 kilobytes of data, at least in the example that I ran. So we can do a lot better if we like zip up all of the content into a single file. Unfortunately, when you're working with some third-party services, you may not have the ability to do this, but if you're running your own application server, this is a recommended way of going about it. So in that case, we just make our download request, download response comes back, we've got everything we've needed. So in this case, we just open up a file transfer to our books.zip. This could be an actual file, or it could be some route that provides you zip information. So once we have everything downloaded, then we go ahead and we call the zip plugin, and we just unzip it to wherever we need our content to be stored locally. So that, again, that's not terribly bad. It's getting better. So we're down from 11 network requests to 1. And because we've gzipped all the content, we're down approximately 90 kilobytes, which doesn't seem like a lot, but over time, it does add up. And anything you can do to get the data down faster to your customers is very much appreciated by them, and as well by their data caps. So you'll want to kind of think of stuff like this. But I'm still not happy. And honestly, the reason I'm not happy, it's the W3C file API. I would like to start with, I'm sorry. But I'm sorry for a reason, because many years ago, when we were looking at implementing the W3C file API, I was the person who did it for Android, so I was the originator of that, so I'm really, really sorry. It is super ridiculously hard to work with and complicated, and in this last example, both the file transfer and the unzip plugins require you to use it in order to specify the destination directories. So here, oh, also, I almost forgot to mention, unzip doesn't work on Windows Phone, which is kind of a pain in the ass. So here's an example of what the file API looks like. So if I just want to get a pointer to a file in the persistent level of my application, I have to call request file system, wait for that callback to come, and then call get file in order to get me a pointer to that file. So that's not too bad, but imagine if your directory structure was 2 or 3 levels deep, and so I had to call request file system, then get directory, then get directory, then get file. And don't even get me started on moving things around. It becomes just a huge pain in your ass, and you don't want to have to deal with that. So what's our solution? Pretty much announcing today, even though it's been up on the web for a while, is we have a new plugin called Content Sync. And again, please try it out, fork it, submit pull requests, let us know what the issues are with it. But this is available for you to use today. It's available Android, iOS, Windows Phone, right across the board there. So in order to get that information down, we now just call sync. You give it your source, which is where the data is stored, and then you give it an ID. And in this case, I'm calling it books. And the ID is just so that you don't have collisions with other data that you sync down to your device. So while the data is downloading, while the data is being unzipped, this progress event is constantly called. So you'll get progress events anywhere from 0 to 100%. You don't have to calculate it yourself by doing like the amount of data downloaded divided by the total file size. It's just a very simple integer from 0 to 100. It takes care of that for you. And then once the data is completely downloaded and unzipped for you, you get back the complete event, which gives you a local path to where everything is stored. So it'll take care of that for you. So what's really happening here? Okay, your zip file was downloaded and stored in a temp location. It was extracted to a private location that only your application can access, so you don't have to worry about any security issues or people getting at your data. You get progress events every step of the way, like I said. And then you get a path back that lets you know where your content is. And finally, that zip file, that temporary zip file, that's cleaned up for you. You don't have to worry about that. So we take care of all of those steps for you. We're just trying to make your life a lot easier. So, not too bad on time. Great. So this is the default version of Content Sync. So the default behavior is to replace things. So if I was to call this sync for books, it would download all that and extract it for me at the books location. If I call that again with the replace, it's going to just delete what's at books already and replace it with this new content. And that, again, is the default behavior. So Now we have another type. It's called local. So local, if it already exists on your device, it won't bother downloading and unzipping the data. It'll just give you the file path back. So if you are starting up your application and you want to use what's already cached on the app, you can use that while your other background is going off and seeing if there's any new content. So local is a very good one to use. And of course, if it doesn't exist on the device, then it'll go ahead and fire off the network request to go and download everything for you. All right, excuse me. So then the other thing is you can do a merge. So if I am constantly updating my content on my application server, I can call the merge, and it will download the new information and just overlay it on top of what already exists. So if I get like new books or new videos or whatever that I need to download to my device, I can continue merging that into the existing content. So you don't have to worry about it. So that's pretty good. It gets just a little bit better for all of you guys. We have another property called copy Cordova assets. And what that allows you to do is on the last phase before we return the completed event, it will go in and copy Cordova.js, Cordova plugins.js, and the whole plugins directory over to this private location. So what that allows you to do is to run your app from this private location. So you can continually update your application. So yeah, did I just imply that you can do this without going around App Store approval? Yes. Yes, I did. So I think Ben and Max stole my thunder a little bit on this because they answered it just after lunch. Yeah, Apple allows this kind of updating now. So in section 332, you can read that bolded statement. They allow it because you're running on a web view. You can download this content. So talking to the Ionic guys, this is something that we want to align upon so that everybody here can benefit. So as Ben and Max said, it now allows you the ability to kind of roll your own, deploy your content sync stuff that's going on. So it's a really powerful new bit of functionality that we're just opening up for everybody. And we already have a number of applications that are using it. If you've used the PhoneGap developer application or the PhoneGap enterprise application, they use the content sync plugin as part of their workflow. So we already have been testing this. We're already using it ourselves. Like we think we've got all the bugs, but again, you guys let us know, and I'm sure you will. So again, what you see here is the ability to merge these two kind of contradictory forces into something very powerful. So imagine being able to send a push notification to all of your users, letting them know that there's a new updated version of your application. Say if you need to roll out a security fix and you don't want to wait the 2.5 weeks for Apple to finally approve it, you can do that yourself. And so what we have here is you get a new push notification. It's targeted directly to the people who are using your app. They open up your app, you give them a nice little dialogue whether or not they want to download the content update now or wait until later. And that way you can continuously update your app. All right. So as I was saying earlier, both of these plugins are available right now. So the push plugin, Android and iOS, is released. We're working on the Windows Phone with Microsoft. That should be available very shortly. But please, try it out. Let us know. And Content Sync is available today for Android, iOS, and Windows Phone. And I am way ahead of time, so I guess that's the Cape Breton and me talking really fast. But
Talk about stealing my thunder.
yes,
Get that thing away from us.
go back to that.
Okay. This is cool.
I hope so.
Do you think if we manage to get it, well, we get it out now, and do you think if everybody here now builds a massive app doing that tonight, that might shame the native platforms into allowing that natively as well?
Yeah, I would love to see that kind of functionality on native, but I'm not quite sure how they're going to do that I mean, what Ben and Max talked about earlier, that's one of the advantages of hybrid development is that you can update these things. I'm not quite sure how you would update, Dex Java files or any kind of Objective-C binary on the fly, but it's definitely an advantage that we have.
One of the things when you showed the doing the books thing and getting lots of images and lots of resources, I was thinking about WebRTC and data channel as well. Because a few years ago we had the internet will be replaced by the real-time web, and lots of companies everything had to be Comet, and then later on Meteor and these kind of things. Well, not Meteor, there was another streaming thing. Do you think a peer-to-peer connection from phones to the server or phones in between each other is something that's going to be an interesting bit to think about as well?
Yeah, I think I actually did quite a bit of work at a previous company with having that always-on connection between the phones and the server, and I don't recommend it. It's really not ready for prime time yet. It puts way too much stress on your server, but I really love the idea of the Internet of Things, and when you come into a room like this and using Bluetooth Low Energy and being able to find other people that are running the same application, that's kind of where I see things going.
Yeah, you even see it in places like Hong Kong when you go to an internet cafe and people can share their internet connectivity over a pay provider with you. Mm-hmm. So there's no wireless in there, but people, when they are there with their data plan, and they allow you to pay money for using their phone connectivity.
That's fantastic.
Which is really interesting and also scary at the same time. I don't know how encrypted it is on his phone, but fair enough. So the pull thing it's interesting that you talked about this, because the push thing is everybody talks about that right now, because that seems to be the interest for marketers.
Yep.
Whereas the pull thing is like a technical innovation thing that is against the model of a closed app market. So do you think there will be a pushback? Does Apple have a legal right to change their terms and conditions again?
Oh, of course, they can do whatever they want. They're Apple, but I mean, we have it in black and white that it's okay to do this now. So I'm hoping that they don't change their mind, but you never can tell because that's Apple. But this is something that you can do with Google, like Android applications, with Windows Phone applications. So I don't think they would. Well, it's Apple. They probably could. Yeah, I don't speak for Apple. I can't tell you.
Kind of, yeah. Obviously.
Yeah.
It's an interesting concept to think about. I mean, for me, it always fascinated me that people saw an app as something fixed in space, whereas a hybrid app was always seen as something that's not quite good. So we still have the interface problem. So with the talk that we saw earlier, with native controls in buttons and scroll views, and the hybrid web view in the back, and a pull notification or a pull service to get the thing up to date. I think we have it now. We can match native performance with the beauty of updating through the web.
Yeah, we can do some pretty amazing things, and I mean that's why we're all here today, is to learn about some of these new things that are available. So I'm really excited about stuff. I mean, I'm actually going to go build an app with some of the new Ionic tools just to learn a bit more about it. I need to manage my hockey team, Oh, wait, I said I wouldn't be more Canadian, but I think there I went.
Feeding your pet moose with an Arduino or something like that?
No, I use a Raspberry Pi to feed my pet moose.
Okay,
yeah,
that makes sense. What?
You went there.
Okay, I did there. Yeah, that's me. It's interesting to see that, though it still feels a bit like we're putting things together. Because I was just thinking like, oh, this is so cool, but what about old web views? And then we have to use Crossway to make that work again.
To use Crosswalk to make it work.
Crosswalk.
Yeah. Well,
could we install Crosswalk with a pull?
No. So unfortunately, the pull is only going to work for your JavaScript, your HTML, and your CSS content, because when the app is built, that binary is just stuck in whatever state it's in right now. So
unless we use script to turn it into JavaScript.
Yeah, that would be interesting. But yeah, if you wanted to use Crosswalk, you'd have to build that into the app to start with. You're not going to be able to update that on the fly. But that's a very good point. So one thing that I forgot to mention is when you do the copy Cordova assets, it's going to copy the version of the plugins JS that you have in your application. So what that's going to do is to make sure that you don't accidentally include a new version of your plugins JS in your download content. So it'll copy over top of it. So it'll use the one that's in the app, and that will prevent any breakages between the different JavaScript layer and the different binary layer, so that they still match up. It's still the one that was packaged with your app.
So this is now PhoneGap. Will it be available for Cordova as well?
It's just at the repo that it's in. It's freely available for everybody. If you use the Cordova tools, you can get it. If you use the PhoneGap or the Ionic CLI, or you can just install that plugin. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's time to bang the drum on that, because that's one of the big puzzle pieces that was missing. That, like, yes, of course, a hybrid app was always totally easy to update somewhere, but going through the native thing then was impossible.
Yeah.
So a lot of the converters that convert into binary might be problematic with that, because they wouldn't allow that call to go out. Like, you have generators like Manifold.js, for example, takes an HTML, makes a binary iOS file, and then allows you to send it to the marketplace. But that would stop that connection, right?
Yeah, it wouldn't work properly.
Yeah.
Yeah, unless your Manifold application embedded a web view in order for you to be able to run this stuff. But I mean, that's total inception right there. That
reminds me of the old things before we had XHR, and we created iframes to load content, and then got them from the iframe out there and circumpassing any security setting of the browser. Ah, wonderful times they were.
Good times. Good times.
Good times. Good times. So what made you do this? Like, how did you get requests from people all the time, and you thought, like, okay, how about we go the other way around, not only push bit?
Yeah, it was something that we were already doing in the PhoneGap developer app, and we were doing in PhoneGap Enterprise. And another thing that Adobe has is the Adobe Enterprise Manager, and apps that we built for enterprise customers needed this functionality as well. They were talking about like that shadow app store, like enterprise customers will run applications that don't ever make it into the App Store or the Play Store, but they need that ability to be able to update on the fly, and it's very important for them. And seeing this kind of thing that we could bring to everyone, we just wanted to open source it. So
it's interesting, because you could even use it for in-app payment.
That would be interesting.
Okay, let's not kill the whole market of Apple, I think, or the other ones that try to close it. So it's what do you think should go next with this? What do you want people to do with that? Do you need more people to go and fork it and play with it and find mistakes, or do you want to have use cases? Do you want to?
Yeah, I would love to see people try it for many different things. I think, again, we have it in a couple of applications right now, so I think it works pretty well, but I would like to see some other use cases for it, because obviously people in this audience have very different use cases than I do when we were building this plugin. So I would love to see what people use it for. Please, send me a Twitter, let me know that you're using it, and just add issues into GitHub so that we can build what you guys need.
One question was about push notifications. Like, are there any examples, or have you seen any of intelligent push notifications that when you say, like, not now 3 times, they get less frequent? Has anybody thought of a more conversation than just in-your-face information all the time?
I haven't seen that, but it's an interesting concept. But mostly push notifications are just like a shotgun blast to all your users. I would love to see the operating system be able to feedback that I'm ignoring it or I've dismissed it. I haven't actually opened it to your application server yourself, so you can kind of run those metrics and back off how many pushes you send. And it's like you can never send too few push notifications. Like, if you think you're sending too little, you probably could still send less. Trust me.
The timing was a very interesting one, because I use my phone as an alarm clock as well, and now in Android you have the only get the alarm through and not the other one. So we seem, when Google announced that Chrome now has desktop notifications, I just this is going to be the new pop-up. Yeah. We put pop-up blockers in the browser because advertisers shove things in our faces all the time, and with this one now, once I subscribe to it, you can send all kind of stuff through it as well. So it would be a model to set what notifications you want to have is something that hasn't been fixed in a browser yet in terms of UX. And
if you take a look at the new push notification API that's introduced in Chrome, it's actually hard to find how to shut those notifications down. It's not very intuitive at all. So if you accidentally I say yes to push notifications for like TechCrunch or something like that, you're just getting inundated with messages, and that's something that we really want to see fixed going forward. So, like I said, we're going to try and work with the W3C and give them some feedback on like over like 5-6 years that we've been doing push notifications and hybrid apps, and kind of feed that back to them, and hopefully everybody can benefit from that.
Because when you did the comparison of like this is good, this is better, I'm not sure. It was kind of engineering thing. Like I like to have granular control about everything that I'm setting, but every choice in an interface is also a decision that the user has to make. So I think people might be overwhelmed if we make it too granular again.
Yeah, that's true. And I would like to see something where you create your app and you have yes or no to push notifications, and then you can have another optional granularity thing, so you can go in and
like
set
the
some of
online
those
surveys
options.
that start with like 2 minutes and then like, oh, it's 50 minutes extras. And
Well, certainly I don't want them to be spending 50 minutes on that, but you do want to consider that you want to give anybody who doesn't have control over what they're getting is going to become frustrated. So you have to give your users some sort of control in order to be able to limit the interaction. And if you don't, then people just uninstall your app and you've lost a customer.
And that would be sad.
Very
Thank you very
very
much.
sad. Thanks, Chris.